25th of August, 2013. 10 years ago to the day, Sebastian Vettel crossed the line to win the Belgian Grand Prix by over 16 seconds. It was a dominant win, taking the lead from Lewis Hamilton on lap 1 and not really being troubled from then on. Little did the Belgian fans know at the time, but this would be the first win in the longest F1 winning streak of all time. He won again in Italy, then Singapore, then Korea, Japan, India, Abu Dhabi, America, and then finally in Brazil. The streak was halted at the start of the 2014 season by Mercedes, who went on to win all but 3 of the races that year. It ended at 9 consecutive race victories, 2 more than Alberto Ascari's previous record of 7. Despite the dominance of Mercedes for the next 7 years, neither of its drivers managed to beat the record. And with the 2022 regulations designed to improve the competition up and down the field, Vettel's record would surely never be broken. That was until this guy came along. Were it not for the qualifying issue in the 2022 Singapore Grand Prix, Max Verstappen would probably have joined Seb with a winning streak of 9. And this year he's been even more dominant. There's an inevitability to Max that we haven't seen in any F1 driver before. No matter where he starts the race, he seems to always be the favourite to win it. In just over a week's time, he'll start the Dutch Grand Prix, his home race. He goes into it having won 10 of the first 12 races this season, and he's on a winning streak of 8. If he wins next weekend, then he'll equal the record, and if he wins in Italy the following week, Vettel's unbeatable F1 record will be beaten. So, will Max Verstappen make history in the next few weeks? Well, for all you Vettel fans, let me start by giving you some reasons that he might not. We're halfway through the summer break at the moment, giving teams a chance to reset and recuperate for the next half of the season. While teams have to take 14 consecutive days off during the break, there are still 2 weeks where work can be done. Aston Martin, who seem to have recovered from their recent patch of bad form, are promising upgrades at the Dutch Grand Prix. McLaren will be bringing something, I'm sure, because they keep hinting that there's more to be extracted from the upgrades they first showed the world in Austria. One of the main threats, I think, to Max breaking the unbreakable record is a DNF. Red Bull haven't yet had a reliability DNF this season, and they've just changed the gearbox in Max's car, but there's never a guarantee that any car will last the race. And even if Max was leading the race by 2 laps, there's still a possibility that his car would fail on him, and arguably that could be Vettel's only hope for keeping the record. Damage to the car is also a possibility. Turn 1 at Zandvoort is a big pinch point, and especially if Max gets a bad start or isn't on pole, then there's a chance he could get tangled up with someone else. Think Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz's contact at the start last year, for example. Max is generally very good at keeping himself out of trouble, but he can't control everyone else on the track. And if he was side by side with someone and they get some understeer, then they could take him out of the race. However, Zandvoort is clearly something of a lucky track for Max Verstappen. He's won 100% of the races held there, and although that's only 2 so far, he's still currently the only driver ever to win their home race 100% of the time they enter it. The amount of support Max gets in Zandvoort is incredible, and it must be a huge confidence boost knowing that there isn't a single person around the circuit who doesn't want him to win. Not that he really needs the confidence boost though, because he'll be going into the weekend with the best car, and I say that because I don't think Red Bull will be caught this season. Upgrades take time to understand, and even if Aston Martin or McLaren can be faster on paper than the RB19, the teams won't necessarily know how to extract that pace from day one. They'll have to spend time experimenting with car setups to truly understand things, giving Max a bit of breathing room after the summer break. And we're forgetting that Red Bull have just brought upgrades in Hungary, and since the debut of that package, the winning margins over their nearest non-Red Bull car have been above 30 seconds. It seems almost that the reduced wind tunnel time they get as a result of leading the championship has no effect on them. Of course, it does have an effect, and Christian Horner explained the ways the team is working around it in a recent interview. He told Sky Sports that they're having to be hugely selective about what goes into the wind tunnel, because they can't afford to waste the allocated time. And thanks in part to the brilliance of Adrian Newey, they appear to be using the wind tunnel to a much greater effect than any other team. So while it's possible that other teams may close the gap to Red Bull over the summer break, the speed of the RB19 at the hands of Max remains to be miles ahead of everyone else. And teams will have to find more than half a second per lap of speed to challenge Red Bull in Zandvoort. As I mentioned earlier in the video, there's an air of inevitability with Max that I can't remember seeing with any driver before him. He could start the next race in France and he'd probably still be the favourite to win it. And it's not just the car that causes this dominance. Max started 4 places behind Sergio Perez in the Belgian Grand Prix, was right behind him before lap 10 and was ahead by lap 17. He eventually won the race with a margin of over 22 seconds to Checo, and it still wasn't really a surprise. I mean, last year he started the race from 14th and people were placing bets not on if he'd win, but on how many laps it would take before he took the lead. It was 12, by the way, more than 1 overtake per lap. In the case of any other driver, we could list a bad qualifying, losing the lead on lap 1, a bad strategy, and a whole host of other things as reasons why they might not win the race. But for Max, those reasons seem to be irrelevant. Now, Zandvoort is a track that's well known for being difficult to overtake on. The main straight is one of the shortest on the calendar, and there aren't really that many hard braking zones in which to overtake in. Starting further back than, say, P5 would seriously hamper his chances of winning the race. However, I'm sure he'd still be the favourite to win. That said, as a Verstappen fan, I don't really want to endure the stress of watching Max have to start the race from anywhere below P5, because I think it would be incredible to see this record broken, and anything that could stop Max from breaking it is unwelcome for me. While of course people might find it boring now, we'll look back on this run in the same way that we look back on Vettel's record. We're witnessing probably the fastest F1 driver in the world make the most well-known racing series in the world look easy. I mean, he even joked about giving the team pit stop practice last race because his leading margin was so much. People have even speculated that the RB19 isn't even that dominant of a car. It's just that Max is so brilliant that he makes it look that way. Certainly, Perez's bad form in the second quarter of the season could suggest that. I mean, Max has taken 8 wins while Checo's finished 2nd, 16th, 4th, 6th, 3rd and 2nd. Checo has been outscored in the last 8 races by Lewis Hamilton, who's currently 4th in the standings. Those aren't performances indicative of being in the best car in F1 right now. Although I'm purely speculating here, and it's obviously not just been the car that's causing Checo's bad form recently. I think part of it was that he just tried too hard to match Max, a driver who simply cannot be matched at the moment. If Max wins in the Netherlands like so many people are expecting him to, then the Italian Grand Prix could be an even easier win. Thanks to the incredible efficiency of the RB19, Red Bull can afford to run lower front and rear wing angles than their competitors, meaning they can run one of the fastest cars in a straight line while still being competitive in the corners, which is exactly the type of car you need in order to win at Monza. The reason I have to list a reliability issue as one of the main risks to Verstappen breaking the record is because of how few mistakes he's made. In 2021, he made a few mistakes, and I think part of the reason for them was because he didn't know if Red Bull would get the 2022 regulations right. And he didn't know when his next opportunity to win a championship would be, or if it would ever happen. Now though, with 2 championships on his belt and a lead of over 5 race wins over Checo, he doesn't need to go for any silly moves like he did on the past. If he doesn't win this race, that's fine, because he'll just win the next one. It's that mentality that I think is the reason Max wins so much. The way he drives is almost robotic. His lap times rarely deviate from the one prescribed to him by the team, and he always seems to have an extra bit of pace in hand. I mean, at the Belgian Grand Prix, he set the 2nd fastest lap of the race while lifting up Eau Rouge when he didn't need to, which cost him more than half a second up the Kemmel Straight. He very clearly could have gone faster, but with GP asking him to take it easy thanks to, apparently, the threat of skid block wear, he left the circuit knowing that he had more pace in hand, and a lot of it. And speaking of, his relationship with the team plays a big part in his success. It feels like everyone in the Red Bull camp wants to see Max win, and none more so than Gianpiero Lambiase, his race engineer. Max's relationship with his engineer is obviously a good one. The calmness of GP over the radio pairs well with the sometimes quite irritable Max. Apparently they're good friends off track as well, helping to build some trust in that relationship. Max has frequently praised GP's direct and precise communication style, which allows him to stay focused on the driving without having to listen to anything he doesn't have to. But as well as that, one of the main things he has to thank GP for is the setup of the car. A race engineer's primary role is to listen to driver feedback and make setup changes to make the car faster or easier to drive. And if GP wasn't so good at his job, then Max simply wouldn't have won as many races. Honestly, I'll be surprised if Verstappen doesn't break the unbreakable record at some point in the next few years. It looks likely that he'll do it in 2 race weekends time, but if he doesn't, then there are plenty of races left to win before 2026. And so I'm sure he'll do it sooner rather than later. While many people will complain that the dominance is boring, I think we'll all look back in 10 years time and think, wow, I'm glad I was around to see this guy race. It's the same as how people are glad to have seen Schumacher, Senna or Prost dominating. A championship fight is nice every once in a while, but even without it there's a lot to enjoy in F1 at the moment. And to that end I'm going to be making a video about F1's midfield fight at some point soon, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Thank you all for watching, and let me know in the comments, how far back do you think Max would have to start a race for him to not be the favourite to win? I'm interested to see what you all think. If you want to learn more about how Red Bull became so dominant, then check out one of these 2 videos on screen, and I'll see you there.